All right. So welcome to the first, but certainly not the last, Choir Genius community discussion about features going forward. And so we're going to try and do this on a approximately quarterly basis because, again, we're trying to involve the whole community in the governance of the platform going forward. So we can take a direction that has to do with what real people want and not just what we think is the right thing to do. So without any more preamble, I will share this presentation. So I hope everybody can see the presentation. As you can see, it's the Choir Genius 4 Community Meeting voting on future directions. And I'll just dive in. A little bit of background. We have been building these systems since 2009. This is our fourth one. One of the big differences recently is that we rewrote the entire platform from scratch to make this fourth generation system. And it's a community automation platform rather than a group automation platform, which is to say two things. Firstly, that you can put your whole community into it and that the billing model makes that possible. So we don't charge by the size of the database anymore. And that has all kinds of benefits for people. We've also separated the core platform for automating any group or community and launched that in March of this year. It's called Essentials. Choir Genius 4, which was launched in May, adds to Essentials the music group specific features. And so some of what you're going to see in terms of, oh, great. I don't know if anyone can hear like the sirens. It's a nonstop thing that happens where I live. Anyway, we're going to add some of the features we're going to talk about are general features, and some of them are specific to music groups. That's probably it for background. Philosophically, where we're at right now is, and we've become much more clear about this over the past little while, is that we're trying to strive for the platform being complete so that the need to cut and paste things into external tools is reduced to a minimum. And we're trying to save 80% of the administration work for a group like yours and to save 50% of the cost. I had a neat meeting with a group not that long ago, and they're not a huge group, but they were spending about $4,000 on tools. And they basically decided that, or they did a little math. The treasurer was on the call and he says, I think we can save $3,000 by using this platform instead. So that's a good sign, I think, for the direction that things are headed. We've really, with this fourth version of the platform, made usability and intuitiveness front and center, and also humility. So I've essentially decided that I'm a terrible person to make all the decisions because I'm too close to the chalkboard, and that instead we are getting real people, normal people, to tell us what is useful, what's intuitive, and how they think things ought to work. I'm very happy with the way that's gone. I didn't mention when I was talking about the launch of Choir Genius in May that we actually had a couple of children's choirs doing beta on that for about 8 months prior to that launch. So even when we launched, things were already massaged into a reasonable shape, and of course that process continues. So once again, we license this by feature level rather than database size. So that you can put your whole community into it. And we're going to really solicit the opinions of the people who are using the platform or who would like to use the platform to figure out the direction to take with it. All right, moving on. These are the features we already have. So there's the member and community database, which also can track relationships between people, which is to say parents and children, if you are a children's choir, or even companies and the people who work for those companies, which can be very useful in certain kinds of fundraising. A very, I think, complete and exhaustive account model with custom fields and all that. So I'm really happy with the way that has come together. There's the whole system can function as a member and community portal. Community because, yes, everybody in your database can log in and they can have a limited amount of functionality without being a member. And there is a public-facing site available. Currently, there is only one. In the future, we may decide to make more. There's a whole system for events, attendance, volunteer management, and time slot sign-up that combines a whole bunch of tools into an integrated unit system that that also connects, of course, with the member and community database, so that you can very easily invite different people in different ways. Very happy with all that. Should allow you to replace a bunch of tools you may be using today. Communication, right now we've got email, notifications, and forms. We made a form on Google Forms for you to answer on the survey, but we actually debated using our own forms because they're very functional as well. And we've also talked about adding different kinds of communication, SMS, for example, push to an app, and none of that is listed as a top-level new feature in what we're going to vote on, but it's already on the drawing board nonetheless. There is, of course, a music library where you can assign music to people so they can see it. You can attach media in different ways, including links to external things like YouTube videos, obviously PDFs and MP3s or other kind of audio files that you can play or look at right in the site. This is one of the areas where the system integrates with a third-party app called Playback Genius. So people can use a real app on iPhone or Android to learn the music by looking at the PDFs and playing the audio files. And then finally, the last major feature is the store, which is built from scratch and has other payment systems plugged in, like PayPal. PayPal, not yet, sorry, Stripe is plugged in now. PayPal is the next one to come. And a lot of automation. So for example, if you were selling memberships, it should take almost all the work out of doing that. Likewise with selling merchandise, selling tickets, really happy with that. So, and again, if you have questions, put them in the chat and we will get to them if Charlene approves of them. So these are the candidate new features blazing ahead that we would like to talk about. So there's kind of one page coming up for each of these bulletins / newsletters, definitely requested by certain people who are on the call, and something we want to add in regardless. Private social media, you'll see what we're talking about with that, but different ways for people inside the group to interact, to strengthen all of the way that that the group gets together and collaborates. Customer relationship management, now a lot of that's already enabled in the existing system, but in order to really flesh it out, we need a few more things. We'll talk about that. Document management, not to replace something like Google Docs, which is fantastic at even like multiple people typing at the same time, but more to have a place where you can put things for your members to see, whether it's minutes. And anyway, I won't dive into it. I'll wait for the slide. Riser placement and seating charts have come up a number of times because that is a feature in our previous system, and we have not yet built it in this one for various reasons. Native mobile apps, which isn't really a feature, but a new interface that we hope to add to this system going forward. I think it would be a big step forward in various ways. Inventory management for certain kind of groups who have maybe a lot of music to catalog, or a lot of outfits, or a lot of props, or whatever they have. And finally, music learning. So that again was in our 3rd generation platform, and we'll get into that a little bit. So these are the 8 things that we're going to ask you to vote on the survey, which is on the front page of our website right now. So first of all, bulletins and newsletters. So of course the system already lets you send email, and the email can already have a pretty looking template that you can control. But bulletins are different from email. So email is sort of inherently controlled by the user, that they can receive an email and archive it or delete it. Bulletins are more controlled by the administration, so that you would expect maybe you'll get a notification about a new bulletin or a newsletter that's assigned to a set. And I'll talk about sets in a second, but probably not the whole thing, so that for example, there aren't 2 versions of the information. So I can imagine a notification going out and then a person saying, I'm going to log into the site to take a look at the bulletin, only seeing the bulletins that are assigned to them through their various sets. And then if you need to update the information, you don't have to worry that they've got a copy of it in their email with the previous version. Let's talk about sets for a second, because they are all over the system and very, very useful. So right now, every role, every subgroup, every label, and every voice part in Inquiry Genius is a set. And with the CRM upgrades, which we'll get to in a second, there'll be more sets that are constructed by logic. So it could be, give me a set of everybody who has ever donated to our group but hasn't done so yet this year. I'm sure you can see how useful that would be in framing your external communication. Anyway, that's kind of bulletins, and I don't want to go down too many tangents here. It's hard for me to stay on topic sometimes because everything is connected in an integrated system. So that's bulletins. If you have questions about that, put it in the chat. Next, private social media. So if you can remember back to when Facebook was new and cool, and there was basically a wall, and you could pretty much guarantee that your friends would see what you wrote on your wall, and there wasn't that much in the way of advertising. That's what we're shooting for. So a lot of the time, now a lot of groups use Facebook even, or different social media platforms to communicate to their constituents. But these days, lots of people don't want to be on Facebook, and so that kind of falls apart a bit. So imagine a future where we have an app and we've got social media features in our platform, and so everybody can be social with each other through their Groupanizer or Acquire Genius site. So there would be individual walls, so you could post it, and I don't know if there would be friends or not, or we would just assume that everybody is friends within the group. That'd be a design thing that I don't think is settled in my mind. There would be a group news feed. There would be chat channels, kind of like Slack. We make extensive use of Slack, and I would love to integrate something like that into Groupanizer/Acquire Genius, so that email wouldn't be the only option. Of course, this opens some thorny issues around quality control, or you might say moderation, because sometimes people are going to post things socially that you don't want them to see, and so that would all have to be designed in as well. So seemingly a fairly simple feature, then a little bit more complex beneath the surface, but something that we'd love to know how important it is to you. Customer relationship management definitely has been in the plan. And in fact, we built a module for this in the G3 system that we called the community module, which I think guided a lot of our thinking in terms of how to build this 4th generation platform. And we decided to build the CRM data model right into the account system that we have. And again, this is why you can put everybody in your community into the database in the first place, because we're moving in a direction that you can then use the system to communicate with them in various ways. So the database part of this is already in place. We call it the account system. The email functionality is already in place, so you can already send pretty looking emails to a set of people, and you can track whether they open it or whether they click. So of course, you can use that. If you had synthetic sets, like we're talking about putting in, then soliciting donations or getting people to come to your show would become that much easier, right? Or even tracking the success levels of different campaigns by looking at who opens and who clicks on different emails that have different approaches. And finally, probably pipelines and funnels like you would see in a Salesforce type system. So for example, if you knew there were people who were likely donors and you wanted to literally follow up on the phone or email or any other channel you want, you could deterministically walk through that group of people and communicate with them and have it keep track of everything for you. And reporting tools, right? Which would be, reporting tools get very interesting and exciting when you're talking about having synthetic sets, right? So who's on this set, who has moved between sets in the last little while. These are the basic features that would really help any system like this move forward. So CRM, big thing we'd love to do if you think it's useful. Document management was a feature in G3. We haven't put it over in our 4th generation platform yet, but people do need, quite legitimately, a place to put handbooks, policies, minutes, things that don't change often, perhaps, but do need to be posted and read by the membership or indeed by anybody in the community, depending on which set you access controlled it into. And these will all be searchable by keyword and possibly integrate with Google Docs. We're big users of Google Docs internally for collaboration and commenting and all of that. Can't imagine that we would ever try to replicate that functionality, but maybe you could make a link to an external Google Doc or automatically update a PDF copy of it or something like that. So you could have the best of both worlds both collaboration and then having things automatically show up and be security controlled by role or set. So that's document management. Riser placement / seating charts is again in G3, and I didn't expect people to say, hey, we want this in the new system, because again, in G3, it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's like, yeah, they like having it, but there's always been lots of requests that it would be that are hard to figure out how to do. Like, oh, well, you can do straight risers or you can do curved ones, but ours have a straight section in the middle, or we like to stand on a collection of a half a dozen square or rectangular risers that are distributed around the stage, and so can we do that? So that's what I mean by more flexible shapes. We would allow you to kind of draw a stage format with places to drag people onto those shapes, rather than only having a straight or curved option. And then more mobile friendly. So now on a big iPad, I can imagine that dragging people around might be quite convenient. On the other hand, on a phone, it's always going to be tiny, and so the ability to make it bigger and zoom in and pan around on it would be great. So we'll see how that does in the upcoming voting. Again, put your questions into the chat. Native mobile apps. Love to do this. So again, we already have one that hits our system to get its data. That's called Playback Genius. People use that. And actually, that works on both G3 and G4. So they can see the music and the learning tracks or teaching tracks that have been assigned to them specifically. And that works already in both. But I can imagine that having more of the interface available on a native app for Android or for iPhone would be amazing, especially when you think about things like push notifications, when you think about integrating chat, the social media features, right? This would be a great use of mobile apps, and so you wouldn't have to log in all the time. All the benefits that you're used to from having mobile apps. And we would, since it is already a big system, we would presumably build the most useful features first as we move forward with the mobile app idea, if that's something that gets people excited. And finally, the last thing we'd love to have your opinion on is this music learning system. So for those not familiar, it's members uploading recordings of themselves, which then get routed to people who will provide feedback. And in the G3 system, that also entailed being able to run a report to see how well all the people assigned to a piece of music have learned it. Some people also configure that to be useful for choreography, so they'll upload short videos. All of that is potentially in scope for a music learning functionality system in G4. And I'd love to hear how many of you would find that useful and interesting. That's another thing that would also be enabled to a great extent by a mobile app. Actually, let me just go back to the mobile app thing. Right now, when you are checking people in to either for attendance purposes or for ticketing purposes, you can use a QR code reader to do that. But if we had a native mobile app, you wouldn't even need the QR code reader. We could just have you use the app to check people in any of those ways. Okay, so that's it for the 8 features. Let's move to Q&A. So I think I have to leave this up. And I think what you're seeing, all I'm seeing is the Q&A screen, but I think the rest of you are all seeing both me talking and now Charlene's going to join me and also talk. And so Charlene, go ahead and give me the questions and I will answer them.
Hello. I don't have any questions quite yet in the chat, so maybe while we wait, Tom, you would like to talk about how our payment levels work. Are there any limits on members?
Okay, right. So there's three levels of the system right now. There are it's basic, standard, and premium. They have different features. So basic is a inexpensive and functional but minimal set of management tools. None of them currently have any limits on the number of people you can put in. Standard adds functions to that, and then premium adds more functions to that. You can see the exact list either inside the product on the licensing page, or assuming that we've been properly keeping it up to date, you can see it on the Choir Genius site. We have talked about putting in some limits, but if we did, they would be high. So for example, maybe Basic would have a limit of 1,000 accounts for members and community, and maybe Standard would have 10,000 as a limit, and Premium maybe 100,000. And we have tested the system up to only 100,000. So I know that's way bigger than probably any groups that are on the call.
Only.
But, yeah, that's kind of where we're at with the limit conversation.
So we have a question from Madeline. What is the rollout timeline for these new features?
Okay. Well, there isn't a rollout timeline, but I will say that the number of pending small features and improvements and little bugs we've gone through almost 1,200 issues in the beta period and in the last few months of being live. And the importance of those issues is getting smaller and smaller. So I can imagine the intention is to dedicate quite a bit of time and energy toward whichever features appear to be the best for the community. And so, and now since I know a little bit about you specifically, I will say that the bulletin feature is very likely going to be one of the first things that we build, and almost regardless of how the vote comes out.
How about we talk about the site security?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. The security is a major issue. This is a cloud-hosted environment. Now, having said that, a number of things that we've done. Obviously, this is hosted at AWS, and they have a very physically secure and very high uptime environment. They also have backups on an individual site basis that we occasionally have to use in case people make a terrible mistake. We also, one of the things that makes our platform unique is that each site has a private database. To my knowledge, all of the other choir management facilities have a big shared database where it's only good coding that hopefully keeps everybody's data separate. In our case, we don't even have to have good coding to make that happen because everyone has a private database. We still endeavor to be very good at that. We've also done a security audit of the system. And of course, we prioritize any security-related items highly. So it became apparent that certain fields in the profile would accept HTML tags, which was not our intention. So that was a little thing we discovered that was plugged quite recently.
Do you have an estimate for when we will be able to use PayPal? That comes from Ian.
That's great. I would expect PayPal to be, it's not going to take that long. The store is already designed for pluggable payment systems. Having said that, it's a little complex and something that we want to make sure we do right because it involves money. I would guess that is about 2 weeks of work. And now it does provide, the way I understand it, it actually does provide slightly better rates than Slack, especially if you can register as a nonprofit with PayPal. So it is on our list. I don't want to commit to a rollout timeline, but I can imagine that happening in the next, before we do our next community thing in the next quarter. So months, not years, would be perhaps a good way to put that. I will also add, if there aren't any other questions, that we're going to put the recording of this up for just a couple of days online so that people who didn't have a chance to attend can read through this and comment on our survey. So, Charlene, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are no further questions, yes?
Correct.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all for being here. I would encourage you all to go now to choirgenius.com. There's a button in the second block on the front page that takes you to the survey. And for your opinions to be properly reflected, it would be great if you would all fill them out. I don't mind if you share that survey link with other people, or indeed we'll send the link out to this video when it gets posted on YouTube. And I don't mind you sharing that either. So unless there's anything else, thank you everybody for being here. And we look forward to serving you better in the future.
We have one last minute question, Tom.
Oh, okay.
From Ian, it says, will the CRM involve being able to keep track of member history?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I probably that should have been a bullet point on that page about CRM. But yeah, history is critical for that, because in order to answer the question, who has donated ever but not lately, you sort of have to know about recent behavior. And so complete history for each person in terms of everything that they've purchased, everything that they have attended, every piece of feedback they've given, every time they've been a member, all of that and more would be in scope on the CRM history. Good. Thank you all again. Thank you, Charlene, for your help with all of this. And I wish everybody a wonderful afternoon.